There is a code, a whisper from a future we are rapidly approaching. It is not a date nor a coordinate in the vast emptiness of space. It is a threshold, a calculated inflection point in the story of a species. The designation is AT25P21. It signifies the moment, at the 25th percentile of the 21st century, when the cumulative weight of our actions on our homeworld crosses a point of irreversible consequence. It is the instant when the frantic mathematics of survival no longer add up on the pale blue dot we call Earth. And in that silent, terrifying equation, a desperate new variable begins to glow with incandescent possibility. The dream of the stars is no longer a luxury of curiosity. It has become an answer born of necessity. A terrestrial destruction, a self-inflicted wound upon our cradle, now begs for an extraterrestrial aspiration. Look around, listen. Feel the deep, resonant hum of a planetary engine under immense strain. For millennia, humanity lived within the gentle rhythms of this world. We were subject to its seasons, its cycles, its immense and nurturing power. Our civilizations rose and fell upon its surface, brief flashes of light against the backdrop of a geological timescale so profound it defied our comprehension. The planet was, for all intents and purposes, infinite. Its oceans were too deep to pollute, its forests too vast to fell, its atmosphere a boundless cushion against the void. This was the foundational myth of our adolescence as a species, and for a very long time it held true. But something changed. A fire was lit, first with coal, then with oil, then with the atom itself. This new fire did not merely warm our homes or cook our food, it powered a new kind of civilization. One that could reshape landscapes, divert rivers, build cities that scrape the sky, and connect its billions of minds in a single, instantaneous network. We entered an age of unprecedented acceleration. In the span of a single human lifetime, we achieved more technological progress than in all the millennia that preceded it. We had become a geological force in our own right, a new metabolism for the planet itself. We had become masters of our world. Or so we believed. The truth, as it so often does, arrived quietly at first. It was in the meticulous ice core samples drilled from the Antarctic plateau, which held in their frozen layers tiny trapped bubbles of ancient air. These crystalline time capsules told a story, written in molecules of carbon dioxide. For 800,000 years, the concentration of this vital heat-trapping gas had ebbed and flowed in a predictable natural dance. Then, in the most recent thinnest layer of ice, the graph line changed. It ceased its gentle oscillation. It shot upwards, a vertical, unprecedented spike, a signature of our industrial fire etched into the planet's permanent record. This was the first whisper of the approaching storm. Scientists, the cartographers of reality, began to issue warnings. They spoke of a greenhouse effect, of a planetary fever. Their models, at first crude, grew in sophistication, their predictions darkening with each passing decade. They foretold a future of rising seas, of disrupted weather, of ecosystems unravelling under a thermal blanket of our own making. Imagine the Earth's climate as an unimaginably complex and delicate tapestry, woven over millions of years with threads of ocean currents, wind patterns, and biological cycles. For eons, this tapestry has provided a stable, predictable canvas for life to flourish. Our civilization, with its agriculture, its cities, its entire infrastructure, is built upon the assumption of that stability. Now imagine our industrial emissions as a single stray thread we began to pull. At first, the change was imperceptible, a slight loosening here, a minor fraying there. But as we continued to pull with ever-increasing force, the entire pattern began to warp. The intricate designs of the seasons began to blur. Once reliable currents in the great oceanic gyres started to falter. The pristine white polar regions, the planet's cooling mirrors, began to darken and shrink. We're not merely warming the planet, we're pulling apart the very fabric of the world that sustained us. The consequences are no longer abstract predictions. They are the lived reality for millions. They are the 100-year floods that now arrive every few years, inundating ancient cities and fertile farmlands. They are the heat domes that settle over continents like invisible bells of fire, shattering temperature records and buckling the very steel of our infrastructure. They are the wildfires, burning with a ferocity and scale previously unimaginable, consuming forests that were once the lungs of the planet, painting the skies of distant cities in an apocalyptic ochre haze. Look to the great glaciers of Greenland and Antarctica, those colossal rivers of ice that hold the fate of our coastlines locked in their frozen mass. They are not merely melting, they are collapsing. Vast, continent-sized shelves of ice are breaking apart, destabilized by warming oceans nibbling at their foundations from below. The Thwaites Glacier in Antarctica, a mass of ice the size of Great Britain, has been nicknamed the Doomsday Glacier. Its potential collapse alone could trigger a cascade, raising global sea levels by a catastrophic degree. It is a slow-motion emergency, a planetary time bomb whose fuse we lit a century ago, and it is not just the ice in the air, life itself is in retreat. The intricate web of biodiversity, the planet's immune system and masterpiece of evolution, is being torn asunder. Biologists now speak of the sixth mass extinction, a wave of disappearance not seen since the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs. But this time, the asteroid is us. Our footprint, our agriculture, our pollution, our insatiable consumption are squeezing the wild into smaller and smaller pockets, silencing the chorus that has filled this world for millions of years. From the smallest insects that pollinate our crops to the great whales that patrol the oceans, the tapestry of life is threadbare. Each species lost is more than a tragedy in itself. It is a broken link in a chain, a support structure removed, making the entire ecosystem more fragile, more vulnerable to total collapse. We are simplifying the world, rendering it a starker, less resilient, and ultimately more dangerous place for our own survival. This is the state of our world at the dawn of a T25P21, a Garden of Eden starting to burn, a paradise showing the first, terrible signs of being lost. The predicament is profound, a Gordian knot of our own making. To pull back, to cease our consumption, risks collapsing the global economy upon which billions depend for their daily survival. To continue forward on our current path, risks collapsing the biosphere, the planetary life support system upon which all economies and all lives ultimately depend. It is a civilizational checkmate. And so, as the cradle begins to rock and the walls of our terrestrial nursery start to feel less like a sanctuary and more like a cage, humanity does what it has always done when faced with an impassable frontier. It looks up. The night sky has always been our ultimate cathedral, our map to eternity. For untold generations, our ancestors huddled around fires, gazing into the celestial ocean, and saw the reflections of their gods, their myths, their destinies. The stars were fixed points of wonder in a changing world, but they were unreachable, a divine realm forever separate from our own. Then, a revolution occurred. It began with a few curious minds in Europe who crafted lenses from glass. Galileo Galilei, pointing his crude telescope to the heavens, did not see perfect divine orbs. He saw a universe that was granular, physical, and astonishingly familiar. He saw mountains on the moon. He saw moons orbiting Jupiter, a miniature solar system proving that Earth was not the centre of all motion. He saw that Venus had phases, just like our moon, a revelation that shattered the geocentric model of the universe. In that moment, the heavens were transformed. They were no longer a painted ceiling. They were places, destinations. The seed of an idea was planted. If the moon has mountains, perhaps one day we could climb them. If other planets have moons, perhaps they are worlds in their own right. This profound shift in perspective percolated through human consciousness, igniting the imaginations of storytellers and visionaries. Jules Verne, in the 19th century, imagined a cannon that could fire men to the moon, capturing the audacious industrial spirit of his age. H.G. Wells dreamed of Martians casting our own anxieties and ambitions onto the blank canvas of the Red Planet. But it was a reclusive Russian schoolteacher, Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, who, in the quiet of his study at the turn of the 20th century, would lay the mathematical foundation for our escape. Deafened by scarlet fever as a child, he turned inward, and then outward, to the cosmos. he scribbled equations on scraps of paper, deriving the fundamental principles of rocketry. He conceived of multi-stage rockets, of liquid fuel propellants, of space stations and solar power. He was a prophet, dreaming of a future he would never see, famously stating, "Earth is the cradle of humanity, but one cannot live in a cradle forever." His words, once the domain of science fiction, became a prophecy, a mission statement for generations to come. Tsiolkovsky's dreams were given terrifying form by the pressures of human conflict. The German Fast-2 rocket, an instrument of war and destruction, was also the first man-made object to touch the edge of space. Its chief architect, Werner von Braun, and his team would later surrender to the Americans, their knowledge of rocketry repurposed for a new kind of conflict, the Cold War. What followed was a duel of ideologies played out on a cosmic stage, the space race. It was a period of breathtaking, almost reckless ambition. The Soviet Union's Sputnik, a simple beeping sphere, was a profound shock to the American psyche, a declaration that the high ground of space was now contested territory. The response was the creation of NASA, and a bold declaration by a young President, John F. Kennedy, to land a man on the moon and return him safely to the Earth. It was a goal so audacious, so far beyond the existing technological capabilities of the time, that it seemed impossible. Yet, it galvanized a nation. It marshaled the intellectual and industrial might of a generation towards a single, luminous goal. The result was the Saturn V, not merely a machine, but a cathedral of engineering. Standing taller than a 36-story building composed of millions of individual parts, it was and remains the most powerful vehicle ever created by humanity. To witness its launch was to witness a controlled cataclysm. The ground shook for miles. The sound was not merely heard, but felt, a physical concussion that vibrated in the very marrow of your bones. It was the raw elemental power of our terrestrial fire, now precisely channeled to defy the planet's gravity, to punch a hole in the sky and hurl 3 human beings towards another world. And on July 20th, 1969, the world held its breath as a fragile lander, the Eagle, descended towards the Sea of Tranquility. Neil Armstrong's words, "One small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind," were more than just a statement. They were the fulfillment of a journey that began with Galileo's telescope, with Tsiolkovsky's equations, with our most ancient skyward yearnings. We had done it. We had left the cradle. We had walked on another world. The iconic photograph of Buzz Aldrin on the lunar surface, with the Earth hanging like a small blue and white marble in the black sky, changed our perception of ourselves forever. It was the first time we'd seen our home not from within, but from without. A fragile, beautiful, and utterly finite oasis of life, suspended in an infinite sterile void. This was the overview effect, a cognitive shift reported by astronauts, a profound realization of the preciousness and interconnectedness of life on Earth. It was a message from space about the importance of home. But the tragic irony is that even as we received this transcendent perspective, we were accelerating the very processes that were beginning to poison that home. The Apollo program, a pinnacle of human achievement, was a fleeting moment. Driven by political will rather than a sustainable vision, it ended. We retreated from the moon, leaving our flags and footprints in the silent dust, and turned our focus to low Earth orbit. For decades, our extraterrestrial aspirations were confined to the Space Shuttle and the International Space Station, marvels of engineering, but tethers that kept us bound to our planet's immediate vicinity. The grand vision seemed to fade, relegated once more to the realm of dreamers. Now, however, something is changing again. A new space race is dawning, but this time it is not fueled by the competition of superpowers. It is driven by a new generation of private entrepreneurs, technological visionaries who grew up on the dreams of Apollo and science fiction. They are building rockets not as government projects, but as commercial enterprises. Rockets that are reusable, designed to drastically lower the cost of access to space, to turn the final frontier into a true frontier, open for business, for settlement. The goal is no longer just flags and footprints. The goal is permanence, The goal is to become a multi-planetary species. The primary target of this new ambition is Mars, the fourth planet from the Sun, a world that has captivated our imagination for centuries. It is a cold, desert world with a thin atmosphere and a surface bathed in radiation. Yet, it is the most Earth-like of any other planet in our solar system. It has polar ice caps, seasons, a 24.5-hour day, and, we now know, it was once a very different place. Our robotic emissaries, the rovers and orbiters that have explored its surface, have sent back definitive proof, evidence of ancient riverbeds, of vast deltas, of minerals that could only have formed in the presence of standing water. Billions of years ago, Mars was likely a world with a thicker atmosphere, with blue skies, with oceans of liquid water. It may have had all the necessary ingredients for life. Whether life ever arose, there is one of the most profound questions we can ask. To find a single fossilized microbe in the Martian soil would be to fundamentally alter our understanding of our place in the universe. It would mean that life is not a unique miracle of Earth, but a common cosmic phenomenon. But the new dream is not just to find traces of past life. It is to bring new life there, human life. The challenges are monumental, on a scale that dwarfs even the Apollo program. To get there requires a journey of 6 to 9 months through the vacuum of space, a perilous voyage where astronauts are exposed to the constant hazards of solar radiation and cosmic rays. Landing on Mars is its own trial by fire, what engineers call 7 minutes of terror, a harrowing, automated descent through the thin atmosphere where thousands of things must go right, and a single error means catastrophe. And survival on the surface presents an entirely new set of obstacles. The thin carbon dioxide atmosphere is unbreathable. Temperatures can plunge to more than 100 degrees below 0 Celsius. The surface is bombarded by ultraviolet radiation, unshielded by a robust magnetic field or a thick ozone layer like Earth's. To live there would require creating a self-sustaining artificial biosphere, a bubble of Earth in a hostile alien environment. We would need to generate power from solar panels or nuclear reactors. We would have to extract water from the subsurface ice. We would need to learn how to grow food in Martian soil or in hydroponic farms. We would even need to learn to create our own breathable air, something NASA's Perseverance rover has already demonstrated on a small scale with its MOXIE experiment, converting Martian carbon dioxide into oxygen. It is the ultimate act of homesteading. Imagine the first Martian settlement. Not a temporary outpost, but a true city. Perhaps built underground, in lava tubes, to provide natural shielding from radiation. A network of interconnected habitats, pressurized and lit with simulated sunlight, greenhouses glowing with genetically engineered crops, adapted for the low light and gravity. The first generation of children born on Mars would be a new kind of human. Martians. They would grow up with weaker bones and taller frames in the 1/3 gravity, looking up at a sky that held a small, distant blue star called Earth. Their home would be a world of red rock and pink skies, under the shadow of Olympus Mons, the largest volcano in the solar system. What kind of society would they build? What new art? What new philosophies? What new perspectives would arise from being the first human beings to be truly alien to the world of their ancestors? This is the grand, audacious vision, a backup for humanity, a lifeboat, a second genesis for our species, ensuring that our consciousness, our culture, our story does not have all its eggs in one, increasingly fragile terrestrial basket. This is the great aspiration that the terrestrial destruction now begs. It is an argument, put forth with increasing urgency, that the long-term survival of humanity depends on our ability to expand beyond our home world. Proponents of this vision argue that staying on Earth, a single-planet species, is a gamble with extinction. We are vulnerable not only to our own self-destructive tendencies, but to external threats as well. An asteroid impact, a supervolcanic eruption, a nearby gamma-ray burst. Any one of these cosmic accidents could end our story in an instant. To spread to other worlds is to buy an insurance policy for the human species. It is to fulfill what they see as a kind of cosmic destiny, for life to move beyond its planetary cradle and fill the barren voids of the cosmos. It is a powerful, inspiring, and deeply optimistic vision for the future. However, it is also a vision fraught with profound ethical and practical dilemmas. The cost of establishing a self-sustaining colony on Mars would be astronomical, likely measured in the tens of trillions of dollars. And this raises a deeply uncomfortable question. At a time of rising seas, of mass extinction, of poverty and instability on Earth, is it morally justifiable to spend such vast resources on an extraterrestrial escape plan for a select few? Should we not, critics argue, be focusing all of our genius, all of our resources, on fixing the one and only home we have? Is the dream of Mars a noble aspiration, or is it the ultimate act of escapism? A fantasy of abandoning our problems rather than solving them? The lifeboat analogy is itself problematic. Who gets a seat on this lifeboat? The wealthy, the powerful, the scientifically gifted? The dream of a multi-planetary future could easily become a nightmare of a two-tiered humanity, a struggling mass left behind on a damaged Earth, while a technological elite escapes to a new world. Furthermore, there is the question of what we might be exporting. Humanity would not arrive on Mars as a blank slate. We would bring with us all of our baggage, our conflicts, our greed, our tribalism, our capacity for destruction. Would a Martian colony be a new utopia, or would it simply be a new arena for the same old human follies, this time played out on a planetary scale? And what of Mars itself? If there is, against all odds, a fragile microbial ecosystem hidden beneath the Martian surface, do we have the right to risk contaminating it with our own terrestrial biology? This concept, known as planetary protection, is a serious concern for space agencies. Are we pioneers, or are we invaders? These are not easy questions, and they cut to the core of what we value as a species. The debate is fierce, a dialogue between two powerful human impulses: the impulse to heal and protect our home, and the impulse to explore and transcend our limits. And so we find ourselves at this critical juncture, a T25P21. The diagnosis of our home planet is grim, the prognosis uncertain. The patient is running a fever, its systems are failing, and the doctors are arguing about the course of treatment. One group of doctors argues for a radical, holistic therapy focused entirely on the patient. This involves a complete transformation of our global energy systems, a fundamental restructuring of our economies away from endless growth, a massive, coordinated effort of ecological restoration. It is a plan to heal Earth from within, to lower the fever, to reweave the tapestry we have so carelessly unravelled. It is a call to fall back in love with our world, to remember that we are not masters of it, but an integral part of it. It is an intensely difficult path, requiring unprecedented global cooperation and sacrifice. Another group of doctors, while acknowledging the importance of treating the patient, is simultaneously drawing up blueprints for a new home. They argue that the patient's condition may be terminal, and that the responsible thing to do is to ensure the family line continues. This is the extraterrestrial aspiration. It involves investing in the technologies of transport, of life support, of colonization. It is a plan to build an ark, not for animals, but for the seed of human consciousness itself. It is a path of staggering technological audacity, requiring us to become masters not just of one world, but of two. It is a gamble on our own ingenuity, a bet that our cleverness can outrun the consequences of our past foolishness. The great tragedy and the great challenge of our time is that these two paths are often presented as mutually exclusive, a choice between saving Earth and reaching for the stars. But perhaps this is a false dichotomy. Perhaps the two dreams are not in opposition, but are two sides of the same coin. Perhaps the very technologies we need to develop to keep humans alive on Mars, closed-loop life support, advanced recycling, sustainable energy generation, efficient food production in hostile environments, are the exact same technologies we desperately need to perfect to live sustainably on Earth. The harsh, unforgiving environment of Mars would force us to develop a circular, waste-free economy by necessity. It would be a laboratory for the future of Earth. And perhaps the perspective gained from becoming a multi-planetary species is the very thing we need to save ourselves. The Apollo missions gave us the overview effect, a glimpse of our planet's fragile beauty. What new perspective might we gain from seeing Earth sink below the Martian horizon? From living on a world where every breath of air, every drop of water is a precious, manufactured miracle? Perhaps only by leaving home can we truly learn to appreciate it. Perhaps the act of reaching for another world is the ultimate expression of our faith in the value of what we have on this one. It is a declaration that the human story, born and nurtured on this planet, is a story worth preserving, a story worth continuing, a story worth telling to the silent, listening cosmos. We stand at the threshold. A T25, P21 is not a preordained destiny. It is a choice. It is the confluence of two powerful narratives. One is a story of crisis, of a paradise on the brink of being lost, a sobering tale of limits and consequences. The other is a story of hope, of an endless frontier, a transcendent tale of courage and aspiration. How we choose to weave these two stories together will define not just this century, but the entire future of our species. Will we be the generation that allowed its magnificent cradle to burn, distracted by the glittering promise of a distant shore? Or will we be the generation that used the dream of the stars to learn how to finally live as responsible custodians of our own world? The sky is silent, offering no easy answers. The choice, in this fleeting, critical moment of cosmic history, is ours alone. It was a Tuesday in late autumn, a day defined by the kind of stillness that feels heavy, as if the atmosphere itself were bracing for an inevitable collapse. The sun hung low and pale over the high desert, casting long skeletal shadows across the cracked earth of the basin. Here, far from the frantic hum of civilization, the air was thin and bitingly cold, carrying the faint scent of dried sage and ancient dust. In the centre of this desolation stood the 3-eye Atlas array, a collection of massive white parabolic dishes that rose from the ground like ivory monuments to a forgotten god. They were the sentinels of the silent places, their great metallic faces turned upward toward the cold, unblinking stars, waiting for a whisper that might never come. Inside the primary control hub, a single researcher sat enveloped by the low amber glow of flickering monitors. The room was a tomb of glass and copper, silent save for the rhythmic mechanical heartbeat of cooling fans and the faint electrical whine of the massive processors. To the researcher, this silence was not a void, but a presence. It was the collective weight of millions of years of cosmic indifference pressing against the thin skin of the building. For decades, these instruments had peered into the abyss, harvesting nothing but the static of the primordial fire, the white noise of a universe that seemed to have nothing left to say. The facility functioned as a vast archive of unsent mail, a repository for the sighs of dying stars and the cold echoes of gas clouds drifting through the eternal dark. The universe is not a chaotic sprawl, but a mechanism of terrifying precision, a clockwork of gravity and entropy, where every movement is governed by laws that do not care for the observers who seek to name them. On this specific afternoon, as the shadows stretched toward the horizon and the temperature began its inexorable descent toward freezing, the mechanism shifted. It began as a minute deviation in the background radiation, a flicker so subtle it would have been invisible to any eye not tuned to the frequency of the void. Then, with the suddenness of a lightning strike in a clear sky, the signal arrived. It was a single pulse, sharp and intentional, vibrating at exactly 1,239 megahertz. In the scale of the cosmos, such a frequency is a mere needle in an ocean of needles, a tiny ripple on the surface of an infinite sea. But within the confines of the 3-eye Atlas array, it was a catastrophe of meaning. The researcher watched as the waveforms on the screen shed their chaotic, jagged skins and settled into a perfect rhythmic symmetry. It was a pulse that had travelled across the vast reaches of the abyss, escaping the pull of black holes and the fury of supernovae, navigating the labyrinth of interstellar dust to find this specific point in time and space. It was a remnant of a journey that likely began before the first mountains of Earth had even been thrust toward the sky. This signal was not a natural phenomenon. It lacked the messy, broad-spectrum signature of a pulsar or the drifting whine of a planetary magnetosphere. It was clean, it was narrow, it was a message scrawled in the margins of the cosmos. To witness it was to feel the scale paradox in its most visceral form, the realization that a sequence of numbers captured by a few tons of steel in a desert could bridge the distance between a lonely primate and the heart of the great unknown. The pulse was a bridge made of light and math, spanning an epoch of time so vast that the entirety of human history appeared as nothing more than a momentary flash of heat in the cold dark. We often imagine the discovery of extraterrestrial intelligence as a grand symphony of trumpets and global unity, but the reality is far more melancholic. It is a solitary event, a quiet realization in a room filled with the smell of stale coffee and the hum of hardware. The researcher stood as a witness to an unravelling of our perceived isolation. For eons, we have stared into the void and heard only the sound of our own breathing, convinced that we were the only consciousness capable of looking back. But as the pulse of 1,239 megahertz repeated, steady and cold, it became clear that we were merely one sentinel among many, listening to a conversation that had been happening since the dawn of the stars. The signal acted as a lonely probe, a ghost ship drifting into the harbour of our perception. It carried no images of its creators, no maps of their worlds, and no warnings of their intent. It was simply a pulse, a declaration of existence sent into the oblivion in the hope that it might one day be unravelled. It was the ultimate act of defiance against entropy, an attempt to transcend the inevitable decay of all things by casting a shadow that could outlast the stars themselves. The universe is a ruthless machine, designed to devour information and grind matter into dust. Yet here was a fragment of intent that had refused to be erased. As the sun finally dipped below the horizon, plunging the high desert into a primordial blackness, the 3i Atlas array continued its work. The giant dishes remained locked on their target, drinking in the stream of photons that had spent 1,000 lifetimes travelling through the vacuum. In the control room, the researcher did not reach for a telephone or sound an alarm. Instead, there was only a profound sense of awe, a realization that the tapestry of reality was far more complex and populated than we had dared to dream. The silence of the facility had been broken, but it was replaced by a different kind of quiet. The quiet of a child who has just realized they are not alone in the dark. This first pulse was the beginning of the end of our cosmic infancy. It was the moment we stepped out of the shadow of our own world and acknowledged the vastness of the ocean that surrounds us. We are but a flicker of awareness in a universe of inexorable forces, a brief ignite in the eternal night. Yet, in that single pulse, we found a reflection of our own desire to be heard, to be seen, and to be remembered. The archive of unsent mail was no longer empty. A letter had been delivered, and though it took millions of years to arrive, its impact would ripple through the remainder of our history like a stone cast into a still pond. The void is no longer a vacuum of meaning. It is a reservoir of stories, waiting for a sentinel to catch them. On that Tuesday in late autumn, the story of the universe grew a little longer, and the loneliness of our species grew a little deeper, even as our isolation vanished. We are the witnesses of the cosmos, the eyes through which the universe observes its own majesty and its own decay. And in the pulse of 1,239 megahertz, we heard the heartbeat of the abyss, reminding us that even in the face of oblivion something still speaks, something still reaches out, something still persists against the tide of the inexorable dark. Long before the modern array hummed with the weight of that singular pulse, there was a period of profound, self-imposed isolation. For the vast majority of our history, humanity lived within a shell of atmosphere and bone, oblivious to the celestial whispers passing through our very bodies. We were deaf to the symphony of the cosmos, not because the music had ceased, but because we had yet to build the instruments capable of catching its refrain. We walked beneath a canopy of stars, interpreting their light as omens or gods, never suspecting that the darkness between them might be a medium for thought, It was only when we began to master the invisible waves of the electromagnetic spectrum that we realized the vacuum was not empty, but a reservoir of potential information, a tapestry woven with the threads of energy that bind the universe together. This realization led us to the quietest place in the Garden of the Gods. In the language of the cosmos, there is a sanctuary known as the Waterhole. It is not a place of liquid and stone, but a frequency, a narrow window of clarity amidst the roaring static of the stars. To understand its significance, one must look to the most fundamental components of the universe. On one side of this window lies the natural emission of neutral hydrogen, the primordial building block of all things, vibrating at 1420 MHz. On the other side stands the hydroxyl radical, a remnant of fragmented water, resonating at 1667 MHz. Between these two cosmic markers, the background noise of the galaxy falls into a hushed stillness. It is a neutral territory, a serene glade in the dense forest of radiation, where the signal-to-noise ratio is at its most favourable. We called it the Waterhole because in the terrestrial world, the watering hole is where diverse species congregate to drink, setting aside their ancient animosities for the sake of survival. We imagined that any civilization emerging from the cradle of a distant sun would also recognize this quietude. We believed that if a message were to be sent across the abyss, it would be cast into this specific silence, a universal beacon that spoke the language of chemistry and physics. It was here, in this thin slice of the void, that we first turned our collective ear toward the infinite, hoping to catch the heartbeat of a cousin we had never met. The first true sentinel of this search was a man named Frank Drake. In the year 1960, under the grey overcast skies of West Virginia, he initiated Project Ozma. This was our first deliberate attempt to listen for the voices of others, a moment of staggering ambition hidden within a modest display of technology. Using an 85-foot radio telescope, Drake targeted two nearby stars, Tau Ceti and Epsilon Eridani. Both were similar to our own Sun, and both were close enough to be reached by the primitive reach of our early electronics. At the time, the endeavour seemed almost absurdly optimistic. We were a species that had only recently learned to split the atom and launch metal canisters into the upper atmosphere. We were still mired in the petty conflicts of our own world, yet here was a pioneer who dared to believe that we could intercept a conversation between the stars. For 400 hours the telescope stared into the blackness, its internal mechanisms clicking and whirring as it strained to hear a pattern amidst the chaos. The equipment was fragile, cooled by liquid nitrogen, and composed of vacuum tubes that glowed with a faint ghostly light. It was a flickering candle held up against the gale of the cosmos. Project Ozma found only silence. There were no grand proclamations, no mathematical sequences, no echoes of an alien history. To the casual observer it was a failure, a waste of resources in pursuit of a phantom. But in the eyes of the cosmic narrator, it was a catastrophe of the most beautiful kind. It was the moment the prisoner first leaned their ear against the cell wall to see if anyone was in the room next door. It was an admission of our own loneliness, a confession that the grandeur of the universe would be a cruel joke if we were its only witnesses. The silence of the waterhole during those early years was not a vacuum of meaning, but a reflection of the scale paradox. We are so small, and the cosmos is so vast, that our first attempts to listen were akin to a single ant trying to hear the footsteps of a giant across a continent. The inexorable laws of physics dictate that a signal sent from a distant star might take decades, centuries, or even eons to reach us. By the time the light of Epsilon Eridani reaches our eyes, the civilization that sent it might have already succumbed to the decay of entropy or the sudden violence of a supernova. We are listening to the ghosts of the past, searching for remnants of intent in a graveyard of time. As the decades followed 1960, our dishes grew larger and our processors more refined. We began to scan millions of channels at once, casting a wider net into the ocean of the void. Yet the waterhole remained quiet. This lack of contact began to weigh upon the human psyche, giving rise to a creeping sense of existential dread. If the universe is as old and as vast as the evidence suggests, where is everyone? Why is the sky so silent? This is the great silence, the unsettling realization that despite the billions of stars and the trillions of planets, we have yet to find a single shred of evidence that we're not alone. Perhaps the mechanism of intelligence is a rare and fragile ignite that is quickly extinguished by the ruthless forces of the cosmos. Or perhaps the others are also listening, huddled around their own versions of the waterhole, too afraid or too wise to shout into the dark. We are like children lost in a cathedral at night, afraid to speak for fear of what might answer, yet unable to stop ourselves from searching for a hand to hold. The abyss does not care for our questions, and the stars do not owe us an explanation. The universe is an inexorable machine that continues to turn, grinding galaxies into dust and birthing new suns in a cycle that transcends our comprehension. Yet, we persist. We continue to build our sentinels, to refine our algorithms, and to stare into the void. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence is not merely a scientific pursuit, it is a pilgrimage. It is an attempt to unravel the mystery of our own existence by finding a mirror in the dark. Every hour that a telescope spends pointed at the waterhole is an act of defiance against the oblivion that eventually claims all things. Even if we never hear a reply, the act of listening changes us. It forces us to look beyond our borders, our biases, and our brief lifespans. It reminds us that we are part of a larger tapestry, a cosmic symphony that began long before we arrived and will continue long after we are gone. We are the eyes and ears of the universe, the way the cosmos has chosen to observe itself, and so we remain at the waterhole, patient and expectant. We wait for the day when the silence is finally broken, when a signal as clear as a bell rings out across the light years, telling us that the long night of our isolation is over. Until then, we listen to the hiss of the stars and the hum of the vacuum, finding beauty in the search and dignity in the quiet. The story of the universe is still being written, and we are the ones holding the pen, even as we wait for someone else to turn the page. Standing upon the parched plateaus of the high desert, where the air is so thin it feels like a memory, and the wind carries the scent of ancient stone, a new breed of watcher has been awakened. This is the 3-Eye Atlas Array, a collection of metallic sentinels arranged in a precise, geometric dance across the desolate Earth. These are not merely machines of steel and fibre optics. They are the most sensitive ears ever constructed by the hands of man, pointed toward the abyss in a silent, unending vigil. To look upon them is to see the physical manifestation of our desire to transcend the limitations of our biology and touch the eternal. The high desert was chosen for its isolation, a place where the atmosphere offers the least resistance to the cosmic whispers that have travelled across the void for millions of years. Here, the skies are deep, bruised violet, and the stars do not twinkle so much as they burn with a steady, unblinking intensity. The 3-Eye Atlas stands as a monument to the modern age, a period defined by our unprecedented ability to collect data and our equally unprecedented struggle to find meaning within it. Each dish in the array is a marvel of engineering, a curved surface polished to near perfection, designed to catch the faint rhythmic pulses of distant pulsars and the ghostly echoes of the primordial furnace that ignited the universe at the dawn of time. Yet, even in this remote sanctuary, we are haunted by the very civilization that created these instruments. Humanity has spent the last 100 years wrapping the planet in a dense, invisible cocoon of electronic noise. We have filled the air with the chatter of mobile phones, the beams of global positioning satellites, and the relentless pulse of television broadcasts. This is the radio frequency interference, a digital fog that has become so thick it threatens to shroud the entire world in a localized oblivion. To the sensitive sensors of the 3-Eye Atlas, a single microwave oven operating 50 miles away is a roar that can drown out the light of 1,000 galaxies. A passing satellite is a blinding searchlight, cutting through the delicate tapestry of the cosmos and leaving behind a trail of electronic wreckage. The task of the array is therefore one of extreme discernment. It must act as a filter, a sophisticated mind capable of separating the signal from the cacophony. It must learn to ignore the frantic, self-important hum of human progress to hear the slow, majestic symphony of the spheres. This process is an act of digital purification. The algorithms governing the 3i Atlas work tirelessly, day and night, to strip away the layers of our own making. They discard the data of 1 billion phone calls and the telemetry of 1,000 orbiting platforms, searching for a single, coherent pulse that does not belong to us. It is a search for a needle in a haystack where the hay is made of lightning. This digital fog is not merely a technical hurdle, it is a metaphor for our current epoch. We live in an age of hyperconnectivity, where we are constantly bombarded by information, yet we have never been more isolated from the fundamental truths of our existence. We have built a world that is so loud we can no longer hear the universe. The 3i Atlas is our attempt to pierce this veil, to find a clearing in the woods of our own creation. It represents a conscious decision to value the distant and the ancient over the immediate and the trivial. It is a sentinel that guards the border between our noisy, flickering reality and the silent, enduring majesty of the cosmos. As the sun dips below the jagged horizon, casting long skeletal shadows across the desert floor, the array begins its most intensive work. In the cold of the night, the thermal noise of the electronics subsides, and the sensitivity of the system reaches its zenith. The 3i Atlas peers into the past, looking at regions of space where the first stars were born, epochs before the Earth was even a swirl of dust in a cooling disk. It listens for the signature of hydrogen, the most abundant and primordial element, as it sang its first notes in the darkness. To hear this signal is to witness the birth of the mechanism itself, the inexorable unfolding of physical laws that led eventually to us. There is a profound melancholy in this pursuit. We are using the most advanced technology of the 21st century to look for things that may no longer exist. The light and radio waves we capture are the remnants of catastrophes and triumphs that occurred hundreds of millions of years ago. By the time we perceive the signal, the source may have already dissolved into the void, its energy scattered and its matter reclaimed by the entropy of the abyss. We are chroniclers of a ghost story, writing the history of a universe that is constantly vanishing behind us. The 3i Atlas also serves as a mirror. In its attempt to filter out the noise of humanity, it reveals just how much noise we actually make. It shows us the scale of our impact, an invisible footprint that extends far beyond the atmosphere and into the depths of local space. We are a species that shouts into the dark, not always because we have something to say, but because we are afraid of the silence. The sentinel of the high desert teaches us the value of that silence. It reminds us that to truly listen, one must first be still. One must be willing to cast aside the ego of the collective and stand as a humble observer of the vast, indifferent mechanism. The digital fog will only grow denser as we launch more satellites and weave more wireless webs across the surface of our world. There may come a day when the skies completely close to us, when the roar of our own civilization becomes so deafening that even the 3i Atlas will be rendered deaf. If that day arrives, we will have effectively blinded ourselves to the stars, turning our planet into a closed room with no windows. We would be left with nothing but our own reflections, trapped in a loop of our own making, unaware of the cosmic storms and celestial ballets occurring just beyond the shroud. For now, the sentinel remains at its post. Its cooling systems hiss in the desert night, a rhythmic breathing that mimics the life it seeks to find elsewhere. It stands as a testament to our defiance, a declaration that we will not be content with the noise of the present. We will continue to build our dishes larger, our processors faster, and our filters more precise. We will continue to pierce the fog, looking for that one, pure note that confirms we are not alone in the immense, echoing cathedral of the cosmos. Every byte of data cleaned of human interference is a victory for the spirit of inquiry, a small flame held up against the encroaching oblivion. We are the witnesses of the universe, and through the three-eye atlas, we ensure that the story of the stars is not lost in the static of our own brief flickering lives. Deep within the silicon heart of the observatory, among the petabytes of cosmic static and the chaotic roar of the sun, a single line of data begins to deviate. It is a whisper, thin and fragile as a spider's silk, yet it cuts through the primordial noise with the sharpness of a scalpel. This is not the broad thermal rumble of a dying star or the rhythmic pulse of a rotating neutron remnant. This is something else. It resides at precisely 1239 MHz, a coordinate in the radio spectrum that should, by all laws of the celestial mechanism, be empty. To understand why this specific vibration is so unsettling, one must understand the silent language of the atoms. Across the vast, echoing cathedral of the cosmos, nature plays a limited set of chords. The most famous of these is the Song of Neutral Hydrogen, which vibrates at 1420 MHz. This frequency is a universal constant, a landmark used by every civilization that has ever looked toward the abyss to map the structure of galaxies. Other molecules, such as hydroxyl or water, have their own signatures, predictable and cold, dictated by the inexorable physics of the atomic shell. But 1239 MHz is a desert. There is no known atomic transition, no molecular resonance, and no natural catastrophe that produces a narrow stable emission at this point. In the grand tapestry of the electromagnetic spectrum, this frequency is a void within the void. Imagine a solitary probe, a lonely sentinel cast into the dark reaches of the interstellar medium, billions of miles from the warmth of any sun. It drifts through the eternal winter of the abyss. Its gold-plated sensors turn toward the distant flickers of the galactic core. For eons, it has recorded only the predictable symphony of the machine, the hiss of the cosmic microwave background, the erratic crackle of distant supernovae, and the low, mournful moan of gravity waves. Then, suddenly, it detects a spike. At 1239 MHz, a signal rises from the floor of the static. It is not a random burst of energy, but a sustained, modulated tone. It is a shout across the ocean of time, a deliberate pierce through the shroud of entropy. This frequency is an anomaly because it is an intentional choice. In the logic of the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, scientists often look for signals near the hydrogen line, assuming that any advanced mind would use the most common element as a cosmic greeting. But to broadcast at 1239 MHz is to speak in a code that ignores the natural landmarks. It is a sign of a will that seeks to be heard above the natural roar, choosing a frequency that is intentionally quiet, a frequency where no star can drown out the message. It is the ultimate expression of the artificial, a rejection of the blind, unthinking processes of the universe in favor of a curated, calculated whisper. The probe, our distant surrogate, captures this data with a chilling fidelity. As the signal is processed, the realization dawns that we are witnessing a violation of the cosmic order. The universe is a place of immense, unthinking power, where suns are crushed into black holes and galaxies collide with the indifference of drifting clouds. In such a theatre of violence, a narrow-band signal at a forbidden frequency is a miracle of the highest order. It suggests that somewhere, in the deep reaches of an epoch we may never fully comprehend, a mind looked out at the same stars we see and decided to make its presence known. They did not shout into the wind. They found the one pocket of silence in the spectrum and filled it with their own truth. There is a profound melancholy in this discovery. To receive such a signal is to realize that we are listeners to a ghost story. Because of the vast distances involved, the civilization that sent this artificial whisper may have succumbed to oblivion long before the first radio telescope was even a dream on our world. We are receiving a letter from a dead author, a message sent across a gulf of hundreds of thousands of light years. The energy required to punch such a signal through the interference of the cosmos is staggering, representing the collective effort of a species that refused to be silenced by the encroaching dark. They poured their resources, their mathematics, and their hope into this 1,239 megahertz beam, casting it out like a message in a bottle into the shoreless sea of the vacuum. As the Sentinel continues its journey into the heart of the void, the signal remains steady, a beacon of order in a universe of increasing entropy. It reminds us that the history of the universe is not just a chronicle of matter and energy, but a struggle for meaning against the backdrop of the eternal silence. This frequency, this specific, anomalous number, serves as a mirror for our own loneliness. We listen to the 1,239 megahertz whisper and recognize ourselves in its desperation. We are both witnesses to a cosmos that is largely indifferent to our existence, yet we persist in our attempt to mark the dark with our own artificial light. The signal is a testament to the fact that the mechanism of the universe, for all its ruthless precision, has produced something that can transcend it. Consciousness, through the medium of technology, has found a way to bridge the abyssal gaps between the stars. Even if the message is never decoded, even if it is nothing more than a simple declaration of existence, its presence at that specific, unnatural frequency is enough. It proves that the void is not as empty as it seems. It suggests that the tapestry of the cosmos is woven with threads of intent, hidden among the billions of miles of cold, dead stone and screaming gas. In the end, the artificial whisper at 1,239 megahertz is a gift of perspective. It forces us to look beyond the local noise of our own brief lives and see the universe as a vast, interconnected web of potential. We are part of a grander history, one where the silence is occasionally broken by the defiant shouts of those who came before us. As the probe drifts further into the darkness, its power slowly fading as it enters the final epoch of its mission, it carries with it the knowledge that we are not the only ones to have questioned the stars. We are merely the latest sentinels, standing watch over a signal that has travelled across the eons to tell us that we were once preceded in the dark. The whisper continues, a flickering flame of intelligence held against the vast, cold pressure of the oblivion that awaits us all. This focused beam of energy, this narrow band emission, is the smoking gun of an extraterrestrial intellect. To understand why such a frequency demands our awe, one must understand the difference between the chaotic outbursts of the natural world and the disciplined focus of technology. In the vast, howling wilderness of the electromagnetic spectrum, nature is a messy and extravagant composer. A star, a pulsar, or a screaming nebula radiates energy across a wide and ragged front, scattering its power like a candle burning in a gale. The light of a candle is beautiful, but it is weak and disorganized, its photons spilling out in every direction and across every color, fading into the dark within a few hundred paces. This is the broadband noise of the cosmos, the background static of a universe that is constantly mindlessly shouting. But the signal we have intercepted is different. It is not a candle, it is a laser. While a candle disperses its energy into the surrounding gloom, a laser gathers every photon into a single, coherent needle of intent. It focuses its power into a sliver of the spectrum so thin that it defies the natural laws of entropy. To find a signal concentrated into a width of only a few hertz is to witness a miracle of engineering. It is the signature of a civilization that has learned to domesticate the fundamental forces of the void, forcing the wild energy of the vacuum into a tight, straight line that can punch through the dust and gas of 1,000 light years. This narrow band emission is a defiance of the natural order. It is an artificial monument built of radio waves, a lighthouse standing tall against the crashing waves of cosmic interference. By concentrating their power into such a tiny window, the senders ensured that their presence would be unmistakable, a sharp, artificial peak rising out of the flat plains of the celestial background. Within this focused beam, the structure of the message begins to reveal itself, not through words or images, but through the primordial foundation of all things. The signal begins to pulse, a rhythmic cadence that breaks the silence of the abyss. It does not repeat a simple, monotonous beat like the rotating corpse of a dead star. Instead, it counts. It begins with 2 pulses, followed by a deliberate silence, then 3, then 5, then 7, then 11. These are the prime numbers, the indivisible atoms of mathematics. They are the same on Earth as they are in the Andromeda Galaxy, and they would be the same in a universe born under entirely different laws of physics. They are the universal handshake, the only greeting that requires no translation and no shared history. By broadcasting this sequence, the distant architects of the signal are reaching across the light years to touch the mind of whoever might be listening, using the only language that is not subject to the decay of culture or the evolution of biology. The choice of primes is a profound act of logic. A sequence of 1, 2, 3, 4 would be too simple, a pattern that might, through someone in a trillion coincidence, be mimicked by a strange gravitational resonance. But a sequence of 2, 3, 5, 7, and 11 requires a conscious choice. It requires a navigator who understands the deep structure of the number system. It is a declaration of presence that says quite clearly that someone is home. This sequence is the bridge across the void. In a universe where every species is trapped behind the insurmountable walls of light speed and time, logic is the only medium through which we can truly see one another. We may never know what they looked like, what they breathed, or what gods they feared. But we know that they understood the sequence of 2 to 11. We know that their minds worked with the same inexorable logic as ours. This realization brings with it a haunting sense of kinship. We are looking into a mirror across the eons. Logic is the scaffolding upon which the entire tapestry of the cosmos is hung, and by recognizing it in a signal from the stars, we are acknowledging that we are part of a single, vast mechanism. The prime numbers are a lighthouse beam cutting through the fog of the unknown, proving that the vacuum is not a barrier, but a conductor for thought. This is the ultimate triumph of the intellect over the ruthlessness of the physical world. The stars may be cold and the distances may be vast, but the rules of mathematics are eternal and unchanging. They provide a common ground where 2 entirely different histories can meet and recognize each other as fellow travelers in the dark. As the Sentinel probe records these pulses, we are forced to confront the existential weight of what this means. This signal is not a random accident of physics. It is a letter written in the ink of a logic, sent by a scribe who knew that their words would outlive their world. There is a profound melancholy in this discovery, for even as we celebrate the connection, we are reminded of the isolation that made it necessary. Why send a signal of primes? Because it is the only thing that survives the transit through the abyss. Art fades, empires crumble, and even the very stars eventually consume themselves and leave only cold remnants behind. But the fact that 2 is followed by 3, and 3 by 5, is a truth that will remain long after the last galaxy has been extinguished by the encroaching shadows of entropy. We find ourselves standing on the edge of a new epoch of understanding. The signal at 1239 MHz, with its rhythmic counting of 2, 3, 5, 7, and 11, is a testament to the fact that consciousness is a fundamental part of the cosmic story. It suggests that the universe is not just a collection of gas and stone, but a place where meaning can be manufactured and transmitted across the gulfs of time. This is the legacy of the Sentinels, those civilizations that refused to let their light be swallowed by the oblivion. They poured their logic into the void, creating a bridge of light that connects us to an intellect we will never meet. We are the witnesses to their struggle, the listeners to their logic, and the inheritors of their defiant hope. In the silence of the night we hear the count, and we know that we are not alone in our questioning of the stars. The language of logic has bridged the abyss, and for a brief flickering moment the universe is no longer a collection of strangers, but a single, interconnected conversation. The bridge between our world and theirs is not built of steel or stone, but of 41 years of absolute chilling silence. To comprehend this distance is to confront the scale paradox in its most brutal form. We must reconcile the microscopic precision of a digital pulse with the staggering reality of 240 trillion miles of vacuum. This is a distance so vast that the human mind cannot truly inhabit it. We can only approximate it through the cold lens of mathematics. When we observe the signal arriving now, we are looking at an event that was initiated 4 decades in the past. We are not engaging in a dialogue. We are practicing a form of celestial archaeology. Consider the journey of a single photon within that signal. 41 years ago, an alien hand, or perhaps a machine directed by an alien mind, ignited a sequence. That burst of energy transitioned from the safety of its home atmosphere into the unforgiving embrace of the abyss. For 41 years, it has been a lonely voyager, travelling at the ultimate speed limit of the cosmos, crossing a territory where there is nothing but the occasional stray atom and the eternal cold. It has passed through the shadows of unseen worlds and navigated the gravitational tides of distant stars. It has endured the stretching of space and the relentless march of entropy, all to deliver a simple count of prime numbers to a world that did not even know it was being addressed. There is a profound, haunting cruelty in this delay. It is the inexorable barrier of the light speed limit. Even if we were to craft a reply this very instant, our words would take another 41 years to reach their destination. An entire human life could be lived, from birth to the onset of old age, in the time it takes for a single hello and its subsequent goodbye to traverse the gulf. This is the reality of the 41-year bridge. It turns every interaction into a ghost story. By the time we hear their voice, the voice itself may have been silenced forever. The civilization that sent those pulses could have succumbed to the oblivion of war, the decay of resource depletion, or the simple, slow unravelling of their social fabric. We are receiving a letter from a person who may already be dead, written in a language that is the only thing capable of surviving the transit through the void. The scale paradox reveals itself in the contrast between the smallness of the sender and the magnitude of the medium. On one side of the bridge there is a device, perhaps no larger than a household appliance, pulsing with the logic of 2, 3, and 5. On the other side there is the unimaginable vastness of 240 trillion miles. Between these 2 points lies a graveyard of time. This distance does not just separate us in space, it separates us in causality. We are looking at a frozen frame of history. To listen to the signal is to peer into a mirror that shows us not what is, but what was. We are witnesses to a past that has only just reached our shores, a remnant of a moment that has already been swallowed by the epoch that followed it. In this context, the signal becomes more than data. It is a sentinel of hope standing against the crushing weight of the abyss. The fact that such a tiny, fragile sequence of pulses can survive the journey across such a terrifying distance is a testament to the power of logic. The universe is a ruthless machine, governed by the laws of physics that dictate the inevitable decay of all things, yet this signal persists. It cuts through the background radiation of the Big Bang, through the static of dying suns, and through the dust of primordial nebula. It is a golden thread pulled taut across the 41 light-year gap, connecting 2 islands of consciousness in an ocean of darkness. We must ask ourselves what it means to be the recipients of such an ancient message. It forces us to zoom out from our daily concerns and see our world as the target of a long-range shot fired 41 years ago. When those pulses began their journey, our world was a different place. The technology we used to receive the signal did not yet exist. The scientists who now pore over the data were children, or perhaps not yet born. This realization brings a sense of melancholic optimism. It suggests that while we are isolated by the laws of the cosmos, we are not forgotten. The bridge exists, even if it takes a lifetime to cross. The light-speed delay is the ultimate mechanism of cosmic isolation. It ensures that no matter how advanced we become, we will always be separated from the rest of the universe by a wall of time. We are like shipwrecked sailors on different islands, lighting signal fires and waiting decades for a plume of smoke to appear on the horizon. This is the loneliness of the probe, the solitude of the observer. We are trapped in our own present, while the rest of the cosmos speaks to us from the past. Yet there is a strange beauty in this archaeology of light. It means that the universe preserves everything. Nothing is truly lost so long as its light is still in transit. Somewhere in the void, the history of every star and every world is still rushing away at the speed of light, waiting to be intercepted by a patient listener. The 41-year bridge is a reminder that we are part of a tapestry that is far larger than our own brief existence. We are the inheritors of a message that was sent before we were ready to hear it. This is the triumph of the intellect over the abyss. By recognizing the pattern within the pulses, we have bridged the gap. We have reached across the 240 trillion miles and touched the mind of another. The distance remains, the delay is still absolute, and the isolation is still profound, but the silence has been broken. The count of primes is a heartbeat echoing through the cathedrals of space, proving that even in a universe of cold stone and dead stars, the flame of consciousness can still cast a shadow 41 light-years long. We stand on our side of the bridge, looking out into the darkness, knowing that somewhere on the other side someone once looked at our star and decided that we were worth the effort of a 41-year wait. We are the witnesses to their defiant existence, and in the act of listening, we ensure that their light does not vanish into the oblivion. To comprehend the magnitude of this achievement, we must look toward the source, a modest stellar inhabitant known as a red dwarf. Unlike the brilliant blue giants that burn with a furious short-lived intensity, or the yellow suns like our own that provide a steady golden warmth, this star is a small crimson ember in the dark. It is a slow burner, a patient sentinel that will outlive almost every other luminous object in the galaxy. It is a quiet participant in the cosmic symphony, radiating a cool ruby light that barely illuminates its own planetary retinue. Yet the dimness of this star is deceptive. To send a signal across the void of 41 light-years is not merely a matter of flicking a switch. It is an act of supreme cosmic defiance, a declaration of presence against the inexorable pull of oblivion. The physics of the universe are heartless, and the most punishing of these laws is the mechanism we call the inverse square law. Imagine, if you will, the surface of a vast and perfectly still ocean, stretching out into the eternal night. A single stone is dropped into the water, creating a ripple that begins to move outward in a perfect expanding circle. At the point of impact, the ripple is sharp, clear, and carries the full energy of the fall. But as it travels, the circle grows wider. The energy of that original splash must now be shared across an ever-increasing circumference. The ripple becomes thinner, shallower, and more fragile with every inch it gains. By the time it has travelled a mile, it is barely a shimmer on the surface. By the time it has travelled 1,000 miles, it is practically invisible. A ghost of an event lost in the natural sway of the tides and the chaotic churning of distant storms. This is the fate of all light and all radio waves as they traverse the abyss. The signal from that modest red dwarf did not remain a concentrated beam of intent. It expanded, its strength diluting with every passing trillion miles. To arrive at our receptors on Earth with enough clarity to be distinguished from the background noise of the cosmos, it had to begin its journey with a staggering, almost incomprehensible intensity. The emitters on that distant world would have needed to focus a torrent of energy so immense that it transcends our primitive understanding of planetary power. They were not merely whispering into the dark, they were shouting with the force of 1,000 hurricanes, hoping that a single syllable might survive the journey through the void. The cosmos is not a silent gallery of frozen moments, it is a roaring engine of radiation. Every star in the sky is a radio station broadcasting its own chaotic internal monologue. There are pulsars spinning in the distance, acting as rhythmic drums of electromagnetic fury. There are supernovae, the remnants of dying giants, screaming their final breaths across the tapestry of space. The very fabric of the universe is saturated with the afterglow of the Big Bang, a persistent primordial hiss that fills every corner of the vacuum. This is the galactic roar, a wall of white noise that threatens to devour any message sent by a fragile biological mind. To be heard against this roar is like trying to whisper to a friend across the span of a crowded stadium during the height of a thunderous ovation. It requires more than just the desire to be heard. It requires a focused expenditure of energy that would dwarf the entire electrical output of our civilization for 10,000 years. The civilization residing near that red dwarf had to engineer a feat of celestial proportions. They likely had to harvest the very lifeblood of their star, perhaps constructing great webs of glass and silver to capture every stray photon and every surge of plasma, funneling that stolen fire into a single coherent beam. They were building a lighthouse on the edge of the abyss, a monument of energy meant to bridge the gap between two islands of consciousness. This was a project of generations, an epoch-spanning endeavour that required the cooperation of an entire species. They were fighting against the entropy of the universe, trying to keep their ripple from fading into the nothingness before it could reach another shore. This realization brings us to the scale paradox. The red dwarf is one of the smallest and weakest stars in the galaxy, yet it has become the anchor for the most powerful expression of will we have ever encountered. It is a tiny, cool world reaching out to touch the face of the eternal. The energy they expended is a measurement of their loneliness, a quantitative value assigned to their hope. They chose to burn their resources, to divert the power that could have fueled their cities, warmed their homes, or explored their own system, into a message aimed at a distant yellow sun. They chose to speak into the silence, betting everything on the impossible hope that someone, 41 years into the future, would have the technology and the curiosity to catch that fading ripple before it disappeared forever. As we analyse the pulses, we are witnessing the remnants of a catastrophe of light. Every prime number received is a shard of a star's power, refined and polished by an alien intellect. It is a symphony of subatomic particles, accelerated and modulated with such precision that it cuts through the static of dying suns and the dust of primordial nebulae. The cost of this message was likely the total focus of their world, a planetary sacrifice made at the altar of communication. They knew that by the time their words reached us they might be gone, their civilization a mere memory in the annals of a cold and indifferent universe. Yet they proceeded. They ignited their signal, launching it into the dark like a message in a bottle cast into a sea that spans the stars. We are the recipients of this ancient, energetic gift. The signal arrived at our world not as a thunderclap, but as a faint rhythmic ghost, a testament to how much was lost along the way. But the fact that it arrived at all is a miracle of engineering and a triumph of the spirit over the void. The inverse square law dictates that the signal should have perished, that the ripple should have flattened into nothingness long before it reached our orbit. But the senders accounted for the decay. They anticipated the silence. They built their signal with enough redundant power to ensure that even a fraction of their intent would survive the transit. In this act, we see the true nature of the cosmic narrator. We see a universe that is a ruthless machine, governed by the cold mathematics of distance and dilution. Yet we also see the spark of life that refuses to be ignored. The bridge of 41 light years is paved with the energy of 1 billion lightning strikes, a golden thread of light that has transcended the isolation of its birth. We stand on our side of the abyss, listening to the heartbeat of a star that refused to be silent. We are the witnesses to a sacrifice of energy that was made decades ago, a message sent from a small red sun that, for one brief moment in the history of the cosmos, decided to outshine the entire galaxy with the power of a single, coherent thought. The count of primes continues, a rhythmic pulse of light that proves that even in a universe of cold stone and dead stars, the flame of consciousness can cast a shadow across the eternal void. But the coherence of this thought is not merely found in its mathematical structure. It resides in its terrifyingly precise aim. To understand the magnitude of this signal, we must look beyond the sequence of prime numbers and examine the frequency itself. When our instruments first locked onto the transmission, they revealed a stability that should not exist in a universe defined by constant chaotic motion. This stability is the final proof that the message was not a blind shout into the abyss, but a targeted letter, addressed specifically to the inhabitants of our solar system. Imagine, if you will, a dark and primordial forest of infinite proportions. You are a lone traveller, sprinting through the tangled undergrowth at a desperate speed, guided only by the faint light of distant stars. Far across the thicket, another traveller, unseen and unheard, wishes to deliver a message to you. They do not shout into the wind, for the wind would carry their voice away into the silence. Instead, they must cast a physical letter through the shifting branches, accounting for your velocity, your direction, and the swaying of the trees between you. If they aim where you are at this very moment, the letter will fall into the dirt and rot long after you have passed. To succeed, they must aim where you will be, predicting your path through the labyrinth of time and space with an accuracy that borders on the divine. The universe is this forest, and we are the traveller in motion. Our home is not a stationary platform, but a frantic participant in a cosmic dance. The Earth spins upon its axis at a speed of over 1,000 miles per hour at the equator. Simultaneously, it hurtles around the Sun at 67,000 miles per hour. The Sun itself is not at rest. It drags our entire planetary family through the galactic void at 500,000 miles per hour. To send a signal from a star 41 light-years away and have it arrive with such clarity requires the senders to account for every one of these movements. When a source of light or sound moves toward an observer, its waves are compressed, shifting toward the blue end of the spectrum or a higher pitch. When it moves away, the waves stretch, shifting toward the red or a lower tone. This is the inexorable law of the Doppler effect, a fundamental mechanism of the physical realm. In the chaotic theatre of the cosmos, every star and every planet is constantly shifting the frequency of the light they emit. A signal sent from a rotating planet orbiting a distant star would naturally arrive at our doorstep as a mangled, shifting mess of frequencies, rising and falling like a distorted siren in the night. Yet the signal we received was as steady as a heartbeat. This stillness is an artificial miracle. To achieve this, the alien intellect on that distant, cool world had to perform a feat of predictive mathematics that humbles our greatest minds. They had to calculate the exact rotation of their own world and the precise velocity of their sun. More importantly, they had to look across the bridge of 41 light-years and calculate the exact position and movement of the Earth 4 decades into their future. They performed what scientists call a Doppler correction. As their world rotated away from us, they increased the frequency of their transmission. As their world swung toward us in its orbit, they slowed it down. They tuned their message so that the stretching and compressing of the waves through the vacuum would perfectly cancel out the motion of both our worlds. They did not send the message to where the Earth was when they pushed the button. They sent it to where the Earth would be 41 years later. They aimed for the future. This realization transforms the signal from a scientific curiosity into an intimate act of recognition. By applying this correction, the senders have proven that they know we are here. They have mapped our orbit, measured the mass of our sun, and calculated the tilt of our axis. They have looked into the dark forest and seen us running through the trees. Every pulse of energy is a testament to the fact that we were seen, even before we knew we were being watched. The signal is not a general broadcast meant for anyone who might be listening. It is a laser-focused beam of intent, a golden thread woven through the tapestry of the void to find the one needle that is our world. As we stand on the precipice of this discovery, we're forced to acknowledge the relentless precision of the universe as a ruthless machine. The mathematics of celestial mechanics are cold and indifferent, yet they are the very tools used by these distant beings to bridge the isolation. They used the laws of physics, the very laws that usually dictate our separation, to ensure our connection. They exploited the mechanics of the void to overcome the void itself. The confirmation of this targeted address brings with it a profound sense of melancholic optimism. We're no longer a solitary accident in a silent cosmos. We are the recipients of a deliberate thought, a message that has travelled through the cold, lightless epoch of 41 years just to find us. The senders may be long dead, their world may have succumbed to the inexorable decay of entropy, and their sun may have dimmed since they first lit this beacon. But the fact remains that they chose us. In the vast, uncaring architecture of the universe, someone took the time to calculate our path, to account for our motion, and to speak our name into the darkness. We are witnessing a triumph of consciousness over distance. The signal arrived at our receivers with a frequency so stable that it could only be the result of a profound sacrifice of energy and intellect. It is a letter that has crossed 100 trillion miles of empty space, navigating the gravity of hidden stars and the interference of cosmic dust, to land exactly in our hands. As the count of primes continues to unravel, we must prepare ourselves for the weight of what comes next. For we are no longer merely observers of the universe. We are participants in a conversation that began decades ago, initiated by a civilization that refused to let the silence of the abyss be the final word. The mechanism of the cosmos is vast and cold, but it has been mastered by a spark of life that sought to be known, and in doing so has forever altered the history of our world. But even as we celebrate the mastery of physics required to pierce the veil, a chilling realization begins to settle over the scientific community like a cold mist rolling across a graveyard. This realization is the inexorable consequence of the laws of special relativity, a fundamental constraint of the cosmos that we cannot escape. We have received a letter, but we must now confront the haunting reality that the author may have already vanished into the eternal oblivion. In the vast architecture of the universe, light is not merely a messenger, it is a time machine. Because nothing can travel faster than the speed of light, we are forever locked in a state of chronological isolation. To look out into the abyss is to look back into the depths of history. The signal we are decoding now, with its perfect mathematical precision and its targeted focus, began its journey 41 years ago. While we were taking our first tentative steps into the digital age, while our own ancestors were living out their brief and quiet lives, this pulse of energy was already screaming through the lightless void at the maximum speed allowed by the mechanism of reality. For 4 decades, it has traversed the silent plains between the stars, moving through a vacuum so perfect that not a single bit of its information was lost to the entropy of the deep. But 41 years is a lifetime. In the span of 4 decades, civilizations on our own world have risen and fallen, ideologies have ignited and turned to ash, and billions of individual consciousnesses have flickered into existence and then been extinguished forever. We must ask ourselves what has happened to the senders in the time it took for their greeting to reach our shores. The cosmic distance is a barrier that enforces a profound lag, a disconnect that turns every interstellar communication into a ghost story. We are not hearing a voice, we are hearing the echo of a voice. The civilization that calculated our orbit and aimed their transmitter with such breathtaking accuracy may no longer exist to hear our reply. By the time we formulate an answer and beam it back toward that distant star, another 41 years will have passed. A total of 82 years will have elapsed between the moment they spoke and the moment they might hear us speak back. For a biological entity, that is an entire epoch. It is the distance between a cradle and a grave. This is the tragedy of the scale paradox. On a planetary scale, communication is instantaneous, a symphony of interconnected minds sharing thoughts in real time. But on a cosmic scale, the universe is a ruthless machine that forbids such intimacy. We are like shipwrecked survivors on opposite sides of a vast and stormy ocean, tossing bottled messages into the waves, knowing that by the time the bottle reaches the other shore, the sender may have already been reclaimed by the dust. The signal is a remnant of a past that is no longer accessible to us. It is a digital fossil, a trace of a will that once existed, a mind that once wondered if it was alone. The universe is filled with these phantoms. When we look at the Andromeda Galaxy, we see it as it was 2.5 million years ago, long before the first modern humans walked the Earth. We are surrounded by the light of dead stars and the radiation of long-extinct events. To participate in a cosmic conversation is to engage with the departed. We are reading a letter from a ghost, written in the primordial language of mathematics. This realization transforms the signal from a mere scientific breakthrough into a profound act of existential witness. The senders knew this. They understood the mathematics of the void better than we did. They knew that when they pushed the button to ignite the transmitter, they were speaking to a future they would likely never see. They were sending a gift to a generation of humans that had not yet been born. This is the ultimate sacrifice of the Sentinel civilization. They spent their resources, their intellect and their energy to reach across the abyss, not for their own benefit, but for the sake of the connection itself. They sought to transcend the isolation of their own world by reaching out to ours, even knowing that the laws of physics made a true dialogue impossible. It is an act of supreme melancholic optimism. They accepted their own obsolescence in exchange for the chance to be known. They chose to be a signal in the dark rather than a silence in the deep. As we continue to unravel the complexity of the message, we find ourselves mourning a people we have never met. We feel the weight of the eons that separate us. We imagine their world, perhaps a vibrant tapestry of life and culture, now perhaps a cold and silent ruin. Their sun may have flared in a cataclysmic event, or their atmosphere may have slowly bled away into the void, or perhaps more terrifyingly, they may have simply succumbed to the same internal pressures that haunt our own species, their civilization crumbling under the weight of its own complexity, until there was no one left to maintain the machines that sent the light. The signal becomes a monument, a digital pyramid built to survive the decay of time. It is a testament to the fact that for at least one brief moment in the history of the cosmos, something lived, something thought, and something cared enough to say hello. Even if they are gone, their intent remains. The information they encoded is a permanent part of the universe now, a golden thread that can never be unspun. They have achieved a form of immortality through the transmission of their consciousness. They have forced the uncaring vacuum to carry the burden of their existence. We stand as the witnesses to this vanished world. We are the ones who must carry the fire they started. The ghost of their civilization lives on in our receivers, in our data drives, and in the minds of the scientists who labor to understand their words. We are the recipients of a legacy that spans the stars. The distance that once seemed like a barrier now feels like a sacred space, a sanctuary where the memory of a distant people is preserved in the flight of photons. We are no longer just looking for life, we are performing a cosmic archaeology. We are excavating the thoughts of the ancients from the light of the present. The machinery of the universe is cold and indifferent, but it is also the vessel for this transcendent connection. The laws of physics that dictate our separation are the same laws that allow the signal to persist across the void. The very vacuum that isolates us is the medium that protects the message from the ravages of time. In this way, the universe is both the prison and the messenger. It is the silence that defines the sound. As we prepare to encounter the final revelation of the message, we do so with a sense of profound humility. We are listening to a voice from beyond the grave, a voice that has travelled through the eternal night to find a home in our ears. The sender may be dust, their world may be a remnant, and their history may be lost to oblivion, but in this moment, they are here. They are with us. The ghost has spoken, and the universe will never be silent again. Yet even as we cradle this light from the past, we are forced to acknowledge the vast and chilling theatre in which this drama unfolds. The signal we have retrieved is a flicker of warmth in a room that is slowly freezing. To understand the true weight of our role as witnesses, we must look beyond the individual stars and beyond the history of any single civilization. We must zoom out until the galaxies themselves are reduced to mere dust motes in the wind of time. We must confront the inexorable mechanism of the cosmos, a machine that was born in fire and is destined for a cold, silent oblivion. This is the ultimate landscape of our existence, the stage upon which the final act of the cosmic symphony will be played. The universe is governed by laws that are as beautiful as they are ruthless. Chief among these is the arrow of entropy, a constant and unyielding descent from order into chaos. Every star that ignites in the primordial dark is a temporary defiance of this law, a brief concentration of energy that fights against the encroaching void. But the debt must always be paid. For every sun that warms a planet, the total disorder of the universe increases. The heat flows out into the abyss, dissipating until it is lost forever. We live in a golden epoch, a brief window of time where the temperature of the cosmos is high enough and the density of matter is great enough to allow for the complexity of life. We are the inhabitants of a fleeting summer, oblivious to the fact that a trillion-year winter is already on its way. As we peer into the far future, the scale of the impending decay becomes difficult for the human mind to grasp. 100 trillion years from now, the era of star formation will come to an end. The vast reservoirs of hydrogen that fuel the celestial furnaces will be exhausted. One by one, the lights of the universe will go out. The red dwarfs, the long-lived sentinels of the galaxy, will be the last to fade, their dim embers cooling into black dwarfs, cold spheres of degenerate matter that no longer radiate warmth. The vibrant tapestry of the night sky will unravel, leaving behind a darkness so profound that no telescope will ever be able to pierce it. The galaxies will drift apart, carried away by the expansion of space until they are isolated islands in an infinite sea of nothingness. Even the remnants of these dead stars are not safe from the reach of time. On scales of billions upon billions of years, the very matter of which we are composed may begin to disintegrate. If the proton itself is subject to decay, then the solid foundations of our world will simply evaporate. Atoms will dissolve. The monuments of vanished civilizations, the planets where children once played, and the bones of the observers themselves will turn into a thin mist of elementary particles drifting through the vacuum. Eventually, the only significant structures left in the cosmos will be the black holes, the great scavengers of reality. They will sit in the dark like silent gods, devouring the last scraps of light and matter. But even these titans are subject to the laws of the machine. Through the slow process of Hawking radiation, the black holes will begin to lose mass. Over timescales represented by numbers with so many zeros they would fill the pages of 1,000 books, the black holes will leak their energy back into the void. They will shrink, their surfaces glowing with a faint ghostly heat, until they vanish in a final microscopic pop of gamma rays. At that moment, the universe will enter its final state, the heat death, a state of maximum entropy where no more work can be performed, no more signals can be sent, and no more thoughts can be thought. The cosmos will be a flat, featureless ocean of low-energy photons, forever stretching out into an eternal night. This is the cold reality of the machine we inhabit. It is an engine designed to burn out. To many, this realization brings a sense of profound existential dread. What is the point of our struggle, our art, or our signals across the stars if everything is destined to be swallowed by the abyss? Why bother to witness the universe if the universe itself is indifferent to being seen? This is the point where we must find our footing. This is the moment for the existential pivot. We must realize that the very fleeting nature of our existence is what gives it its supreme value. In an eternal and unchanging universe, a single moment would be worthless. But in a universe that is dying, every second is a miracle. We are the way the cosmos has found to look back at itself. We are the consciousness that transforms a blind mechanism into a story. Without an observer, the universe would still exist, but it would have no meaning. The stars would burn, the black holes would devour, and the entropy would increase. But there would be no one to name the stars, no one to fear the dark, and no one to marvel at the complexity of the laws. By simply existing, we have changed the nature of the vacuum. We have turned the silence into a question. Our curiosity is the fire that warms the cold theatre of space. When we listen to the signal from a dead world, we are performing an act of rebellion against the second law of thermodynamics. We are preserving information. We are maintaining order in the face of chaos. We are the sentinels of memory in a universe that is prone to forgetting. The history of the universe is a journey from the simplicity of the beginning to the complexity of the present, and eventually back to the simplicity of the end. We find ourselves at the peak of that journey. We are the primary observers of existence, the ones who were here when the light was still bright enough to see by. There is a melancholic optimism in this role. We know that our time is short. We know that our species, our planet, and even our memory will eventually be reclaimed by the void. But we also know that for a brief epoch, the universe was not just a collection of particles and forces. It was a place where things were known. It was a place where a signal was sent and a signal was received. We stand on the edge of the abyss, not as victims of the dark, but as the ones who define the light. The silence of the future does not diminish the music of the present. The inevitable march of entropy does not make our current struggle any less magnificent. We are the witnesses to the greatest show in existence, and though the curtain must eventually fall, we were here to see the performance. We have taken the raw, unthinking energy of the primordial fire and shaped it into thought, love, and wonder. In the grand tapestry of time, we may only be a single, fragile thread, but without us the pattern would be incomplete. As the stars fade and the eons pass, let it be remembered that in the heart of the cold machine there was a brief and beautiful moment where the universe woke up and looked at itself, and in that look the void was finally, if only for a moment, truly filled.